Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Just when you thought you didn't need or wouldn't get a sequel to I Spit on Your Grave, we get a third movie in the franchise, but this time we're going back to Jennifer Hills and we're not concentrating on the story from I Spit on Your Grave 2. In this one, the tone of the movie is certainly different from the first two, and this one is about Jennifer dealing with the grief and just dealing with what she can do of what happened from the events in part one and how she reacts to living in the real world now. We see from her point of view, she spends her time just being careful, not talking to other guys, even guys that she works with. She's very cautious. She looks at everyone as if they're bad guys, and rightfully so because of what happened to her. Everyone seems to be, or someone would seem to be, a predator or the prey, and she decides, I'm not going to be the prey, I'm going to be the predator. In this one, she doesn't call herself Jennifer, she calls herself Angela. So at this point in the film, we don't know if she's on the run somewhere or if she's genuinely legally changed her name so that nobody can find her as Jennifer Hills. She decides to go to a rape counselling group and she meets a girl called Marla there. And Marla brings out the best in Jennifer because she's obviously went through similar things that Jennifer's went through. Don't know if she's went and killed everyone like Jennifer did, but she's obviously experienced being raped, she's experienced being tortured, etc. So she gets a bond with Marla because she's just her type of person. But Marla's more of a free bird. She does what she wants, she says what she wants, she doesn't care what people thinks of her. And I think Jennifer admires that because Jennifer wants to be like that eventually. But at this moment in time, Jennifer's still kind of closed off because of what happened. And because of this, you can see that Jennifer's starting to enjoy life again. She's watering her plants, she's smiling again, she's happy. Something that she's not felt in years. There's another girl from group called Cassie. She's just like 17 or 18 years old, and Cassie explains that there's her stepdad Ron is abusing her and her mum won't believe her, but I don't think she's telling her mum the full story because she's scared in case they all fall out. So Ron just continually abuses her. Marla doesn't like this, so Marla decides to take the law into her own hands and brings Jennifer along, and they decide to scare Ron and say, never do it again or we'll come back for you. And it seemed to have worked, and I think that at this point Marla and Jennifer think to themselves, we're doing something right here, something that the police can't or won't do. We're taking the law into our own hands. As Jennifer's getting all happy again, she decides to meet Marla for a drink one night. Marla doesn't show up, so we can assume what happened to her. She goes back to group, everyone's grieving, and Jennifer's like, what's happened? And the group leader says that Marla's been killed and they think it might be her ex who's done it to her. Throughout the film, we see that Jennifer's still in with the PTSD, with what happened to her back in the day. She has thoughts of what happened. We see like flashbacks of what happened, but we also see visions of what she wants to do to people, and then it cuts to the real world and she decides she's not going to do what she wants to do. We're introduced to Detective McDillon. He's the guy who's on the case. He's the one that's trying to figure out who killed Marla. And with the help of Jennifer, they can maybe track down the person that's done it, most likely her ex. So the film from this point starts to take a more investigative turn. It turns into more an investigative thriller rather than that rape revenge that we got in the first two movies. The person that was accused of Marla's death, her ex, walks free. Jennifer's not happy with this, so she decides to go back to her old ways and start getting revenge. First, she goes after this guy who most likely did kill Marla because they didn't confirm if he did or didn't, but let's assume for the movie that he did. She leads him out to the back of the club and she mutilates his little pee-pee, and she just kills him. Luckily for Jennifer, she changed her name to Angela because if the police knew that she was Jennifer Hills, then she would obviously straight away be suspect number one because of what happened previously. So changing her name to Angela at this point is probably a good idea. We find out that Ron starts to abuse Cassie again, the little girl, and Jennifer's so angry with this, but so is another guy in the group called Oscar. Oscar is someone whose daughter killed herself because she was raped and everybody was rape shaming her, so he always goes to the group because he feels sorry for everyone, but he tells everyone out loud exactly what needs to happen to Ron. He says that Ron should get a steel pipe shoved up his asshole and that's how he should die, and Jennifer looks like, I'm going to do that. And as I'm thinking to myself, if she's going to do this exact thing, then I know that Oscar's going to get the blame for it. So Jennifer then catches up with Ron and she leads him to an abandoned building and she does exactly what Ron recommended. Ooh. The police then came back to the group to start questioning people, but they look at Oscar and think, you're obviously the guilty one because of what you recommended. So they look at Oscar, they arrest Oscar and take him away. Nice work, Jennifer. After Oscar gets out, Jennifer goes to speak to him and sits him down. She asks him questions about his daughter, and he's like, okay. So he starts to tell her everything that happened to his daughter, but what she's trying to find out is who actually done it to your daughter so I can catch them and kill them myself. Jennifer manages to track down this guy, but unfortunately he's like 6'8" and he's massive and he overpowers her, and it looks like he's about to rape her. And I hope that he didn't, because we didn't get a rape in this film. He didn't manage to do it because the detective turned up and killed him. So at this point, I don't know if maybe the detective was following Jennifer as bait, or they just happened to stumble upon them at that exact moment. Detective Boyle starts questioning Jennifer. She looked all smug because she knew who Jennifer was. She obviously called herself Angela, but she's like, you're Jennifer Hills, I know you're Jennifer Hills, and she's about to get prosecuted and put to jail. But at this point, Oscar comes in and he admits to killing all of the people that Jennifer's getting accused of, but he also commits suicide as well. So he dies admitting the killings, which means Jennifer gets off free. Within the story of this film, it just goes to show that Jennifer was right. The police seem to be concentrating more on people like Jennifer than actually concentrating on catching the killers, or the rapists in this case. With the police watching Jennifer's every move now, she finds it hard to go out and start killing people again, obviously, so she dresses up and pretends to be prey instead of the predator, and she goes out looking for someone to attack her so that she can kill them. So it seems like she's starting to turn a little bit crazy here. There's a guy called Chief who harasses Jennifer all the way through the movie, and she manages to catch up with him, and she starts offering herself onto him, and he's like, whoa, back up, girl. So he seems to be scared of her, but eventually he calms down, she calms down, he's like, okay, let's do it. And before they're about to do it, she tries to kill him, but the detective comes and he says, you don't want to do this, Jennifer. And as she's about to stab Chief, it cuts to black. Now, what I like about this film is throughout the movie, we see Jennifer talking to a therapist. We assume that she's talking to the therapist because of what happened to her back in the first movie, which she still does. She talks about that, but she also talks about the events of things that's happening as it's happening. And that was quite confusing until we got to that point. Jennifer took off her robe and she was wearing prison uniform. So all this time throughout the film, she's talking about the events that's happening in this film to the therapist, because she's in jail because of what happened throughout this movie. For a third movie that didn't need to be made, for a movie that didn't need to have a twist, I think the twist at this end was actually pretty neat. The reason that she's having her last session here is because she's getting out, she's learned, she's going to be better, and the therapist signs her off. But as she's leaving, two other girls in the prison try to shank her. She manages to defend herself and kill these girls, and throughout her rage she turns around and kills the therapist as well. So it seems like she's not quite ready to be living in the real world again. If you watch the scene carefully though, you see all the blood on her face, and when she turns around and looks at the camera, she's got no blood on her face. So that looks like it's probably just a vision that she's having, and if it is, it means that Jennifer is innocent and she's going to be leaving the jail, but she's still got those thoughts in her mind. So if there was another movie, then she's probably still capable of killing people because she's still got that thought in her mind. Overall, guys, I think again it was a decent film for a third movie in a franchise that it didn't need. Like I said, it didn't need a third movie. It was decent. I'm glad that they brought Jennifer back. I'm glad that it wasn't your typical rape revenge film that we've seen before in the I Spit on Your Grave franchise. And I like that we're dealing with the same girl who went through the ordeal in the first movie, came back to her and showed us how she was coping with it. Obviously she wasn't coping well. Obviously there isn't things in place for girls to deal with things like this in the real world. So this is how some of them cope. Obviously it's an extreme example because it's just a movie, but these things can happen. This is how some of these people can feel after the things that they go through. So I'm glad that they kind of brushed on this instead of just giving us your typical rape revenge. They could easily have just done that, but they decided not to. They decided to give us some sort of story and justice, or more justice, for a girl like Jennifer. So yeah, I actually enjoyed this film. I didn't think I was going to like it at all, but when Jennifer came back, I was like, okay. When there was no rape revenge, I was like, okay, it's more of an investigative movie, seeing the repercussions and the effects of the victims and the abusers, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. So if you've seen this movie, guys, leave your comments down below, let me know what you thought of it. Did you like the welcome change, or do you prefer the rape revenge aspect to these movies? As always, thanks a lot for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back!